So hello guys and welcome back to the channel. So this is Rocket Lab Weekly episode 10. My God, can you believe that we have done this for 10 episodes?
Oh man, 2.5 months.
Yeah, it's
Living the
crazy.
dream.
Yeah. So this is a very interesting episode full of new data and interesting facts. A lot has happened to Rocket Lab in this past week. And one of them is that the share price is trending nicely up. I was just checking on my phone. I believe this last week we were 7.8% up, and the stock price is currently $4.80. And how has your week been, Matt?
Oh, week's been good. The whole market's up, so I was looking at the net worth calculator, and things are on plan. So can't
Awesome.
complain with that.
Did you earn a house this week, or just a Lambo, or
Nah, no house this week. Just
small car?
a small car. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Congrats. I had a very interesting week because yeah, Palantir was falling and Rocket Lab was going up, and I was like on zero the whole week. Um, and it's really weird because I'm up so much on Palantir that I really don't care where the stock goes. So I was just very happy that Rocket Lab was going up. Anyways, so let's start with the Rocket Lab related news. So we got I have to share it. Sorry, guys. I need to get better at how to share stuff on this. I believe I'm sharing now, right?
Yeah, you're doing great.
Awesome. I'm even zooming in. So Rocket Lab announced a new launch or an addition to the 2024 launch manifest. And it's basic. I first thought that it was a new launch. So instead of 22, it's going to be 23 launches. But it's actually a rideshare launch. And I guess it's very profitable for them to sell, because then they're basically selling the same rocket multiple times. So is this? I guess it's not in no way bad for us, but tell me your opinion about this.
I think it's to me, the way I look at it is it's expanding to a new country, and I think that this is important, right? I mean, we've seen the U.S. be involved, we've seen New Zealand, Australia, Japan, and now I'm starting to see things from Korea, which to me is always a good thing, right? So to me, I'm all about partnerships, and I'm not a huge person that wants to rush for getting as much dollars through the door as possible. If that was the case, I wouldn't be invested in something like a Palantir, but to me, I'm all about establishing great connections and great partnerships, and to see another government agency that's non-US join, to me, is just going to be another staple into, or another brick into, the foundation of what Electron's able to accomplish. One, and then two, another partnership that we can build on for Rocket Lab in general. So really awesome to see, and really looking forward to the collaboration with folks in Korea in the future.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, there's a new launch in like 4 days or something. Would you be up to live streaming it if it's in like some normal time?
If it's at an appropriate time, it's on the 13th, right? So the 13th is a Wednesday. Yeah, I mean, if it's I'm trying to remember what time it was. I know it's from Launch Complex 1. Specifically,
it's super tricky to think with New Zealand time, because they're like 1 day ahead of us, I think. I'm not.
So I don't know if that's going to be like Tuesday morning, or if it's going to be early Wednesday morning, or what have you. But
it could be Thursday morning for us. Like it's Wednesday afternoon for them, and then like Thursday.
Because they said no earlier than the 13th.
Or no, Tuesday. Yeah, you see, it's super complicated.
Let's see. Did they give a window? When specifically? I'm opening up the press kit they have, but if I'm at home and I'm not at the office, then absolutely. Or if I can sneak home in the early afternoon, I'd be more than happy to.
Doesn't Palantir have a function, that you see on these YouTube shorts, that like it keeps your mouse moving and then it looks like you're working remotely? and you can sneak out.
Yeah, nah.
No.
It's interesting. Yeah, it says no early. It's actually pretty funny. They originally they have the old with what I'm looking at here. I'm not sharing it, but they said the window is no earlier than December 13th. But then they have the old windows that are open. Because remember, it's supposed to launch on the 28th of November. That's when you and Dave G kind of made that initial, and so they have they updated the top part, which is no earlier than December 13th. But then you look at the bottom, it's showing like New Zealand time, UTC, EST, PDT, and it's showing still the old November time frame. So if they're launching it in the evening time on the 13th, that should be like midnight, 2 a.m. For me. So I could easily stay up to be able to see that Wednesday morning.
Yeah, that would be like morning for me. Some AM time. But yeah, I'm too much of a fanatic, so I'm willing to get up early and be.
And just to clarify for everybody that's listening or watching, that's not the specific Korean launch. That's the Moon God Awakens launch, right? I think that's the Japanese satellite, if I believe, if I'm correct on that one. I got to double check. Yeah, Japan Earth Imaging Company. That's right.
Yeah. And what do you call it? It's the first rocket launch that I'm going to watch as a shareholder. And I must say I'm nervous about it because I've never invested in a company where, like so much can go wrong in so little time. And I'm curious what the stock price is going to do if the rocket launch is successful. Like then we, start a timeline where basically on average every 17 days we're going to have a launch all the way up to the end of 2024, and hopefully we will even have like a higher cadence in 2025.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe I'm. You're going to hate me for saying this, but generally speaking, the stock price doesn't move too much when Rocket Lab sends a rocket into orbit. But this one's a little different, right? Because the last time we launched something was in the third quarter, and obviously it didn't go as expected. We had that anomaly. And so with respect to this is kind of the restart of that cadence. So if they are actually able to get a successful relaunch of Electron, and they can build on to what they're going to do next year, then maybe the price will move a little bit. But generally speaking, let's just say this time it might move the price. But let's just say when it gets to like when we're in the fourth or fifth launch next quarter in 1Q and we're transitioned into 2Q, I don't think you're going to see a big movement from launch to launch.
I mean, for me, I guess it doesn't move the stock price up, but if the launch fails, then it really moves it down. It only moves it one way.
Exactly. The same thing happened with Astra, though, right? Astra, back when they launched their first one, and it was kind of like failing to launch, everyone sold off. I think it was like 13 or 20% down that day. So, and generally speaking, if it launches as expected, nothing really happens to the price. But this one might be different. Like I said, it's got a lot. This one's different than every other one that I've launched in the past because I initially invested in the company in 2021 thinking the same, and the stock prices would either be up or slightly down, or it wouldn't be mooning like you would expect the rocket is doing, right?
Yeah. Cool. And speaking about delays and what it causes to not being able to launch on time, I just found this very interesting news that I went to the wrong one. I'm sorry. This was the one. I skipped ahead. So North Star, which is a debris tracking satellite company from Canada, they had to raise additional money because they are waiting on Rocket Lab. So they seem to be very, very unlucky because they had Virgin Orbit as their launch provider. And then Virgin Orbit went bankrupt, and then they had to opt for Rocket Lab. And then I guess they're not super unlucky because they were the next launch after this failed launch. So it could have been worse. They could have been the one that failed on the rocket, right? That I think that would have been a lot worse for this company. But it's just funny that funny is a bad word, but it's interesting to see how a delay in Rocket Lab cascades into other companies having second degree effects.
Yeah, it's they lucked out, I guess. They're skinning through, but hopefully they can get by next time when they launch.
Yes. And so the next news, which was very, very interesting to me, is that SpaceX is raising money, and they are valued at 175 billion. And their valuation, so they are, as far as I understand, the biggest privately held company, the only company that went IPO that had, so the current record holder IPO is Alibaba at 143 billion, something like this. And SpaceX is currently bigger than Disney or Comcast and is at the same level as Nike and one other very big company. I don't remember that. And what's interesting about this is when I saw this, I thought to myself that Rocket Lab valuation doesn't make any sense. And probably this because, normally if like one stock is doing really well in one industry, like it lifts all the other stocks. So I was thinking that this should give quite a boost to Rocket Lab. And to put this in perspective, SpaceX is projected to have $6 billion of sales or revenue this year, and the 175 billion valuation divided by 6 billion is a 29.1 price to sales ratio, compared to, I think Rocket Lab is currently at like 9 point something, less than 10. So it's 3 times as much valuable as Rocket Lab. And part of it is understandable because I understand that SpaceX is a lot more proven. They have Starlink, but I'm not sure that the 3x makes sense to me. So what do you think?
I think, when you think about it, you have a premier company that is the forefront of a lot of envy, and a lot of folks are investing in it. Google's an investor. Many other folks are investors within the company. Versus a Rocket Lab, while it's a great company, it's still in a space that I think is trying to forge itself into the realm of, say, a SpaceX. So it's kind of like what Netflix was doing, right? A lot of people were really skeptical now Netflix initially, and then they became the premier sort of company for streaming, and then they got valued very well. Then everyone looked down on Disney for trying to stream, and many other companies for trying to stream. And now obviously the valuations for those are starting to come through as well. So I think what you're going to just see is just the inevitable of normal valuations for newer technology or newer industries, right? Where you have a front runner, which initially is kind of poo-pooed on, that's SpaceX. That front runner then obviously becomes extremely valuable. Everyone else then started to chase them. You're going to have a fight for 4th, 5th, and 6th place, and everyone else is going to eventually drop out. And the basically industry continues to consolidate until you have 4 or 5 big players. I think that's essentially what we're seeing right now. You have SpaceX, which is showing that this is something that is profitable with their Starlink, and being able to bring value back to the business and back to the world in terms of monetary, whether that's through internet or what have you, and also being able to help with space exploration as well. And people are starting to recognize that. And you're starting to see those contracts come through for Rocket Lab. But I think that at the moment, as you've said many times, you're seeing that revenue spread against so many different companies. And until you see further consolidation, I think it's going to be hard to realize, who should be the one that's valued at 50, 60 billion dollars, right? Because you're kind of fighting between ULA, Rocket Lab, relativity is still kind of in play. Is Astra still in play? You're still trying to knock out all these other players. And until that happens, I think you're going to be dragged down by the fact that a lot of these players will eventually fall out. And once they do fall out, that's when things will start to go up and to the right for Rocket Lab's valuation.
Yeah. Two questions that I want to bring up. Like, one of them is, because you gave this example of streaming, but if you look at, for example, EV makers, There it was like the exact opposite, that Tesla had a very, very hard time getting any sort of good valuation. Then they succeeded with the Model 3 ramp, they 20x'd. And then the companies like Rivian, Nikola, even scam companies got insane valuations even before they even had an EV that was produced and working on the public market. So I would argue that
No,
there
the
it
same
was.
thing happened. The same thing happened, Vince. You look at all the SPAC prices for Astra and a lot of these companies in 2020, 2021, they were severely overvalued without even having an actual product. And now it's really to the point where, so I think a lot of this happens. You're going to see the same thing in AI, where everyone's getting these absurd valuations. Anybody that just mentions AI in a conference call has been getting extreme valuations. And now it's going to come back down to reality and who actually can deliver.
I mean, yes, I agree with you, and this was exactly the second point that I wanted to bring up. That, for example, Relativity's last valuation was 4.2 billion. They haven't launched anything to orbit yet. They have had a suborbital flight, and if you look at Rocket Lab, let's say that for simplicity's sake, let's say that the valuation is $2 billion. It's 2.4, I think, or 2.3. But for simplicity's sake, let's say it's 2 billion. But Rocket Lab is not a pure launch provider. So they are 33% launch and 66% SpaceX systems. So if, again, this is probably not correct, but if you divide up the 2 billion into 33%, then their launch service is something like $600 to $700 million worth. And then you take a look at another company like Relativity, who again has not launched anything, versus Rocket Lab, who has launched 40 successful missions, 170 satellites in orbit, and one of them is 4.2 billion, and Rocket Lab is 600 million. And then I checked up Firefly's valuation, and they are also like something like 1.5 billion with not having launched anything, versus Rocket Lab 600 million. And you look at Blue Origin, I know it's not very comparable. They also have not launched anything. They have a ton of employees. They have Daddy Jeff Bezos, and their valuation is between 5 to 10 billion. They don't really have a valuation because they're not for sale, but this is like what I found online. And then I feel like it's true what you're saying, that the valuations have come down a lot, but I feel like Rocket Lab valuations has come down a lot, and there is still like these SPAC companies or that are still crazy valued compared to Rocket Lab. And I'm like, why take the best company and then give them the worst valuation, and then take these other companies and still keep the valuation super high?
I get what you're saying. I think even in any sort of scenario, there's always going to be companies that are severely undervalued. Broadcom was undervalued for a very long time. Many companies, for some reason, just have this stigma of always being trading at a discount compared to peers. Oil, for example, a prime one of this is oil and gas companies. European oil and gas companies trade at about a 30 to 40% discount compared to their American counterparts on a price to earnings basis. For some reason, there's just always this impact to certain companies. And it might just be that Rocket Lab is always going to trade at a cheaper valuation, but that doesn't mean it's going to not grow in terms of value over time if they're able to continue to deliver. If they're eventually going to get some sort of valuation of a price to earnings multiple in the long term, let's say of 20 to 25 times, and a SpaceX is going to get a 30 to 35 times. We see that from time to time, right? Coca-Cola has always traded at a premium comparatively to Pepsi, right? It's always just there's always that premier sort of company that gets an extra 20 to 30% valuation just because they're the premier company. So I think it's usual. Sometimes it flips too, right? So I think at the time this is a gift, and I think if anybody's sitting out there, I think that within a year or a year and a half's time, I don't think we'll be able to say it's trading at a cheap valuation, because I think the word will be out that this is a good one. I mean, a prime example of this is when the SPAC craze happened, because this obviously is a company that went public through SPAC. everyone was talking about Astra, everyone was talking about Momentous, everyone was talking about all these other companies, and Rocket Lab was the one I heard about last, dead last. And it wasn't until I started to do some due diligence and work with a buddy of mine where I actually started to be like, holy crap, these guys are actually doing something. They're way ahead of the game compared to all these other people. This is the one I'm investing in. Not because it was a SPAC or anything like that, but because, hell, it looked like a company that could compete with SpaceX. And this is 2 years ago. So
Yeah.
in that respect, like, some companies just unfortunately just never get the valuation or love that they truly deserve. And it could be, a whole mess of reasons, right? Some people like their ego stroked. Wall Street likes their ego stroked from time to time. And it could very well be that Peter Beck is not a guy that you can, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Buy. He's a guy that has a true vision, and that's part of the problem that Karp has as well. And I think a lot of times that's what Elon faced very early on with Tesla, is he couldn't be bought. He had a vision. He was going to execute that. And until it actually started to deliver in droves, and the retail investors got a hold of it and everything of the like, that's what really drove the stock. And eventually Wall Street turned to love him. But I think it took a little bit of time, and I think it'll do the same with Rocket Lab.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. And we got a comment here. I think part of the reason Rocket Lab valuation is not as high as others is the restraint they have about disclosing far distant future projects. Exactly. I 100% agree with this comment. And I was going to say something. Now I have a senior moment. I totally blanked out on what I was going to say.
It happens to the best of us. No, I mean, I think that they're more operational intensive, right? I think that they focus more on telling people what they're going to do and actually getting it done.
Yeah,
versus,
here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, because what I was going to say is I think that Rocket Lab is going to be undervalued until it becomes undeniable how good they are doing. And I think that neutron flying is going to be such a moment. Or I think that will be that moment, because if Neutron is flying and they have customers and contracts sold for that company, they should be cash flow positive, even if maybe they are not GAAP profitable yet. But as soon as they start being cash flow positive, there is zero bankruptcy risk anymore, and they will have a very easy time to finance themselves for whatever plan. And that should be an inflection point when they get a much higher valuation than it is currently.
Yeah, and I do want to give a shout out to Dave G, because he said something about how the stock is headed to 5, and I was like, it's like, I really think we need to get to a place where we've reestablished cadence and we get to $100 million a quarter next year in terms of revenue and a lot of these other things. And I think Dave's right. I think with all the positive words that I've seen, a lot of people joining the community, a lot of content creators also hopping on the train and joining the community, I think what Dave has said is right. I think $5 is something that is going to be in reach, and that's good for me, because $5 is about my break even for a lot of my shares. And I think that we will probably start to see a little bit more influx of capital, and it might be something where we're at $5 before a lot of these catalysts actually happen, and that'll be good. I think $5 is appropriate. It's $2.5 billion market cap. I don't think it's way overvalued there, considering what the potential upside for this thing is. So I just wanted to say that I concede. I think Dave is right. I think I might have been a little bit too harsh saying that we need to have a few more of these catalysts before $5 shows up. I think Dave's right. It might show up faster than I thought.
Awesome. And talking about them not hyping the stock. So this week there was also an interview with the investor relations person from Rocket Lab on this Opto channel. I actually never heard of them before. I watched this whole interview, And the guy is so freaking conservative. I almost went bearish on the company. So, for example, he said that, we have 22 launches for next year, and that's a record-breaking year, and launch business is very lumpy, and there can be barriers, and like if we make this, I will be very proud, and that's a very high cadence. And I'm like, this is not what I want to hear. I want to hear like, yeah, we're gonna do 22. Hopefully, maybe we're going to sell a little bit more, and then the years after, the cadence is going to increase. And I just felt that the whole interview, like he was so muted on what he communicated, and I was like, is this the right way to keep relations with investors? And yeah, I wanted to show like a clip, which for me is like why I'm invested into Rocket Lab, right? It's this phase 3 of them having their own satellite constellation, and like how he talks about it. And maybe you do need to see the whole interview to fully like put it in context, but I just want to show it, and then we take what you think, Matt. So let me know if you can hear it.
Well, a final question from me then. We usually finish by asking our guests for their next big idea. So perhaps there's an exciting sort of application
Yeah, I can hear it.
In regards to how Rocket Lab plan to use this technology, one that maybe isn't necessarily that well known within the mainstream that you can talk to here.
Yeah, I'd say that the most exciting thing in our minds is really kind of taking the Neutron vehicle and scaling it, right? That the design of the vehicle is going to be a really, really healthy, competitive piece in that medium class market, where because Neutron's designed to be reusable from the ground up, because it has carbon composites and a methyl ox engine that, along with a really good ballistic coefficient, can hopefully be a really efficient vehicle from a capital standpoint. I'd say that where we get excited is around that application, right? So we've been pretty clear that we're continuing to evaluate the market, and we think that once we kind of make our decision on what spectrum we think is the best or what application we think is the best, utilizing hot supply chains from a satellite manufacturing perspective and then leaning into that application can be a really nice kind of strategic handoff. Although I'd say that there's more to come in that domain.
Yeah, really interesting. I think a fascinating insight to end on. That.
So that was the clip. Like for me, this is like the whole investment thesis for the company. And then he's just like, yeah, we're evaluating, more news to come. It can be a very nice handoff. And I'm like, I understand if it's Peter Beck that he would say it like this to make sure he doesn't promise anything and like he keeps it real. But this is like the investor relations. Like, can he not like sound a bit more enthusiastic? Or yeah, what do you think, Matt?
I think it's a company culture thing, right? I mean, they want to be they want to say what they do, and they want to make sure that they don't over deliver. I think right now they're kind of on their back foot, right? They just came off of a failure, so they don't want to over promise anything, and then unfortunately something happens, and more headlines will be able to show up, right? Where they're promising the moon, Jupiter, and Mars and Venus, and next thing you know, there is still a possibility that there's another failure that comes up on the 13th of December. I don't think it's going to happen, but I mean, there's that possibility. And here they are, kind of on the kind of upswing right now of trying to get things back in order and on the brink of 22 flights next year. And so I don't think you can come over as super bullish right now. I think you have to play your cards appropriately. And I think overall it's a game of chess. I think you have to be a little bit slower and actually show people what you're delivering rather than, I guess, focusing too much on what's the word I'm looking for? Focusing too much on trying to hype people up, right? I think this is probably part of the reason why, the stock might get a little bit muted of a price comparatively to others, where they're just like Astra will tell you that they're going to launch a rocket next month, and yet they don't even have a workable rocket, right? I mean, You have to kind of put things into perspective, and some people just operate things very differently. And I think in terms of visionaries, I think Peter does a good line of balancing both of being a visionary as well as an operator. And I have to give him kudos for that, because a lot of people would need to have a second person in command to be able to have like a COO coupled with. And I think that Peter does a good job playing both parts visionary as well as an operator.
Yeah, yeah, and you must be right that it's a company culture thing, but like I realized last week that there is a freak scenario which I don't think is going to happen, but like the chance of it happening is not zero, and that is that if they run out of money developing Neutron, right? Then so we come to a point that they need to raise money, but Neutron is delayed and is not flying, and the stock price is as low as it is. Then we as shareholders are going to get some pretty bad dilution, and like it's just a very bad scene, right? So because there is a non-zero chance of this happening, like I as a shareholder would prefer them, like I understand that, you know, there is a pendulum, and then like Astra is probably at one end of the pendulum when they're like it's almost borderline. I don't want to say the F word, but you know, like when you have too unrealistic, and then you have like when you're too conservative, that's the other end. And I feel that they need to be like somewhere in the middle, you know.
I get it. You know, but I'm not more, you know, you used the word hype earlier. I don't know if you said it specifically when we were chatting just a moment ago, or if you said it before the stream, but I'm not a guy that's here to hype up stocks. I'm here to present facts, whether or not I think that they're going well for the company or going poorly for the company. I'm not hopping on YouTube to be able to pump the stock price. I'm hopping on YouTube to be able to ensure that at the end of the day, the facts that are supposed to be out there are out there, whether they're good or bad. You know, I've been able to provide balanced advice on Palantir and try to eliminate myths. You know, if I wanted to be out there on YouTube and pump up the stock price, I wouldn't talk to half of these people, because half these people are literally just sitting there doing that. In reality, I've tried to talk people off the ledge, and I'll help them understand a little bit more about the company and what they do. And I think I wouldn't be able to wake up and look myself in the face in the mirror and be able to just say, okay, I'm just going to wake up and pump stocks all day. That's not why I'm here. I know that's why a lot of people hop onto YouTube and you know, make videos and try to pump their bags. But at the end of the day, I don't really need the money. Like if I was focused on money, I wouldn't be here. I'm here to help people. I'm here to help people understand how to invest. I'm here to learn more about the companies, because I could walk away today and probably retire in most parts of the world if I really wanted to. But, you know, I'm here to help in any sort of way, shape, or form, and present good ideas and provide a balanced ideology as to why some of these companies are performing well or not doing well. So I'm okay when somebody's a little bit more balanced and they don't necessarily hype up the stock.
Look, I agree with you, and I'm also not here to hype up the stock, and I'm also not here for the money, and I 100% agree with you. And I also don't think that Peter Beck, the CEO, should be hyping up the stock, but I do feel that there is that hat in the company, or that position in the company, that should at least try to make the stock go up, right? And I feel that that's this guy who maybe, because like, have you heard like Adam Spice talk, for example, on the Investor Day? He like, I felt that he was like a very good balance to Peter Beck, because when he started his presentation, he was like, I wish we could like draw a bag to present like how much money we're going to like make for the investors, you know? And then he was making like still like, I'm very much not for, you know, fraudulent or overhyping, but like I think at one point in investor relations, like you do need to be somewhere in the middle, like you need to be selling a little bit what you're doing. And I completely understand why Peter Beck doesn't do it. I understand why we are trying to not do it, but somebody should do it at some place.
Yeah, I don't know. More to see. He seems like he's rather new to the industry with respect to being, you know, front facing and being in front. I think that Peter's done a good job. I think now they're getting to the place where the company's probably big enough where he's needing to take on a little bit more of the responsibility of being, an actual investor relations manager. And so he's probably feeling a little bit of that pressure. Maybe he'll grow into it. You never know. I've seen some good investor relations folks come and go. And it's sometimes it's a little bit like the White House press secretaries, right? They'll be there for a couple months, and the next thing you know, they're ousted because of how good of a job that they're doing. And then sometimes you have some that are on for a couple of years. So this guy, he's there for a reason. He's there to help take some of the pressure off of Peter and Spice. And I think at the end of the day, he'll either grow into it or they'll find somebody else.
Yeah. But by the way, how choppy I am, or was it just a weird piece and then it's normal now, or?
Sorry, what was that? My headset cut out.
Yeah, I said like how choppy is my feed, because I saw you were asking if I'm.
I was wondering, am I coming through clear, or am I not coming through clear?
I hear you loud and clear.
So I haven't chopped up this whole time?
No, I didn't hear that you were chopped up.
Okay. Yeah, no, maybe it's just my internet connection. It can only upload fast enough. Maybe I just can't download fast enough, but nobody else is saying anything, so I just assume it's me. So just continue on.
Okay, cool. Yeah, here's another comment. No chop. Don't push your stock. Let your company's results speak for themselves. And again, normally I agree with this, and maybe I'm just reading too much into it. Again, like my worry is that if we would need another raise for whatever reason, and the stock price is very low, it's with Dave G, we talked about this, that the rising stock price is like a self-fulfilling prophecy, and the falling stock price is also self-fulfilling prophecy, because if the stock price would go up to 10, 15, 20, then any bankruptcy fear would go away, because the stock price is so high that if they need to raise capital, it's no problem to do, right? And if the stock price would fall to $3 to $1, it would be, like you would start to get fear of like, okay, what's going to happen if this company ever needs to raise money? So we are in this peculiar situation, like we're not Palantir, where we are cash flow positive even though we're not GAAP profitable, and there's a non-zero chance that they might run out of money, right? As I said, I sleep well at night. I'm not like staying up, having fits about this, but I'm just saying the chance of this is higher than zero.
Yeah. No, I don't think with $385 million still on the balance sheet at the end of 3Q and a burn rate of less than $30 million, generally speaking, on a quarterly basis, you need to panic right now. I think if things are not improving towards the second half of 2024, with respect to becoming EBITDA positive and being able to start adding cash to the balance sheet instead of burning cash, that's a point in which I think that maybe you should start to question things, right? And whether or not you might need to be diluting shares in order to attain the cash. I think we're in a very different situation comparatively to companies like Velo3D, Astra, Virgin Orbit, obviously. I don't see us being in a space right now, at least for the next 12 months, of having to raise cash externally. What I could see is, as things progressively get better for the company from a financial standpoint, then be able to take on a little bit more debt to be able to fund. And I think you can do that when you're on a cash flow positive what's the word I'm looking for? When you're on a cash flow positive trajectory. Right now, I think with the extra expenses of Neutron, which will hopefully ramp down kind of going forward, I think that we're making good progress is what I'm really trying to say. But I think that you also have about a year or two's worth before you really need to be truly concerned about that. And maybe I'll eat my words, but I'm fairly confident that within next year we'll become kind of EBITDA break even, or EBITDA positive rather, and cash flow break even. And personally, I think at that point, once you're able to do that, then it's more about how much revenue you can kind of feed going into Neutron. And I don't think we've hit the milestones yet, as Peter has kind of noted, but I think the second half of next year, you're still going to start to see a lot of Neutron contracts come to fruition once we start to hit enough milestones kind of going forward. So what am I trying to say else other than that? But I don't think that right now is a concern to be that we're going to get diluted other than just normal share-based compensation.
Yeah. So you made some very interesting statement that I want to circle back to. So you said that within 1 year they can be cash flow positive, and I just want to dial into that because they, like, the current logic is that they will launch Neutron at the end of 2024, and that's still a test launch, right? And then so the first paid customers is probably early 2025 if they are not late on Neutron launch. So did you like misspeak and you meant that once Neutron is flying they will be cash flow positive, or do you think that the space systems and the Electron launches will be so cash flow positive that they will like outproduce the money that they're losing on the research and development of Neutron?
Well, I mean, you have to think they're coming up with a lot of molds and a lot of that. And that's the most expensive part of generating any sort of new product or rocket. And once that's kind of done, everything should become cheaper and cheaper to do after that. So with the increase in revenue, I mean, you have to think we barely hit 200 million this year. Next year, they're going to be on track for closer to 400 million in my anticipation. Whether it's 350 or 400, I don't know. But if anything is a kind of a telltale sign, I think that the first quarter is going to be close to 100 million as they've kind of prescribed. Second quarter might see a little bit of a pullback just because there's only 3 or 4 launches rather than the normal 4 or 5 or 6, which are kind of anticipating throughout. But I think when you see that cadence kind of coming through and closer to a run rate of $100 million per quarter, I think that you're truly going to start to see a lot of that operating expenditures and underlying, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Underlying overhead of just SG&A, sales, general, and administrative costs get wiped away. And I think that's really a lot of what we're fighting right now. We're fighting the fact that we're not making enough revenue to cover overhead as well as the capital expenditure associated with Neutron. Yeah. And I think at 100 million, I think you're going to get very close to that. I mean, you heard Spice talk about how they're getting close to a 50% gross margin on rocket launches when they have 6.25. And I think that's something that's very valuable to see. 50% margin is extremely good. And if you have 30% margins on your 30% margins on your space systems, now you're looking at something that is averaging at a greater than 30% margin overall. And then you're just at that point fighting how much is your overhead. So I think with the increase in sales that you're going to see in the first quarter, second quarter, you'll get to a place that's much closer to cash flow break even. And if you're not, then you should start scratching your head. If we should slow down the burn, right? The burn is kind of averaged anywhere between $20 to $30 million a quarter. If we're not slowing the burn down to less than $20 million a quarter, and there's not some sort of notation of a huge Neutron expense, then I would start to scratch my head. And you also have to think is once you have a finished Neutron product, the product itself to build one of these rockets is obviously going to cost less than $40 to $50 million. So, because otherwise they wouldn't be advertising that the launch price for it will be $40, $50 million. So the first few might be more expensive, but eventually over time, it's going to get less and less expensive to create these rockets due to efficiencies, as well as the ability, once we get them landing appropriately, which I'm fairly confident will take them, 4 or 5 tries. But once they get them landing appropriately, then the cost and the gross margin associated with Neutron is going to be huge as well. But I think if you're not getting closer to cash flow break even by the second half of 2024, I will be scratching my head because
that's some big statement.
That's not a big statement. That's just reality. I mean, why is it a big statement?
I mean, because I think it would be a mega achievement before Neutron is flying. Like I would, like I understand what you're saying, but like in my, like if I model like their things out, and again I don't fully know how they are spending money on Neutron, right? Because it could be that in the last months leading up to the test, they need to build out the actual infrastructure and the launch pad, and certain things only get paid for at that time. Because I understand that you're saying that they are incurring the cost now, and then the cost will sort of like wind down when they come to the actual testing of the rocket. And I think that the cost will like ramp up as we get to the test, and then I think that they would be cash flow positive with Neutron being in service. And that's why I think it's like a super bullish scenario for me if they achieve cash flow break even before Neutron is in operation.
Interesting. I'm just more of the thought that you're going to increase revenue by about 70 to 80% per quarter next year. I mean, we're delivering about 60 to 65 million on an average basis this year. Now you're talking about ramping it up to 100 million a quarter. So I think that that's going to more than offset a lot of the expenses that are going to be incurred from an operating expense standpoint to be able to get Neutron on the pad. Maybe I'm thinking about that inappropriately, but I think right now, I don't know what the run rate is.
I hope you're right. I
don't know what the run rate is to run the business. And I think I don't have enough detail to know what the Neutron expense is versus what the underlying sort of regular associated operating or running costs are for Electron and the space systems business. But I'm fairly confident that we'll get very close to break even, if not above break even. And I think the fact that we're even in a place now where we're only burning $30 million a quarter is pretty impressive when you think about it, considering Astra and many of these other people aren't even developing rockets, and they're burning cash like it's free.
Yeah. Okay, so then let me ask you this way. Do you think we are getting Q4 earnings in about 2 months? So if they were to see that they go to their company meetings and they're like, okay, Q4, we might actually be cash flow positive. Do you think that they would announce it in their, forward-looking guidance that it happens, or as Rocket Lab style, they will just go around it and then they would just come in the quarter and say that, yeah, we were actually cash flow positive, completely ahead of schedule, and yeah, it's a surprise?
I don't really think that they, to me, just based off the company culture that I've observed, I've read a lot of conference calls. These guys are about what they're doing in terms of getting things up into space and creating partnerships, and the financial piece is secondary to them. Not to say that it's not important. I think it is very important to them, but I think the way they kind of push everything is purpose is paramount, along with safety for them, obviously. But second comes, are we able to keep this business alive? And if not, how can we make it stay alive? And to me, I think that they would be more focused on getting Neutron on the pad rather than focusing on, let's just say, profitability. Because I think that for me, I don't think that, I think it's going to be something where they're more so focused on that rather than focusing on being cash flow break even or anything of the like. But I don't think that they're going to hate that, because at the end of the day, it's going to mean that they have security and they have the ability to I guess it'll obviously be important for everybody, but I don't think they're going to pre-announce it or anything of the like.
Yeah. But okay, we can agree that the Q4 guidance is going to be very, very interesting, because if we get that guidance and we can do a little bit of math, like we're going to see if they're going to come close, because they should disclose how much is left on the Neutron spending. And there's usually a gap of like what is their gross margin, and it's usually positive, and what is the net margin of the company. And let's say that you see that, okay, the gross margin is 26% and the net margin is -7%, then it's like a 30% gap. So then that if the gross margin would be, let's say, 40% plus, then maybe the net margin would be 10% plus, because you take this 30% gap. And then we could actually speculate on if they would make it to cash flow positive next year. For me, it would be a huge milestone and mega achievement, and it would be amazing. In my calculations, it's 2025 when they should be cash flow positive.
You very well might be right. I'm maybe just more optimistic about how much cash they're going to be generating next year. I mean, let's just take if they're able to kind of keep their let's just say it's a $375 to $400 million target for next year,
with a 40%, let's say, margin.
Yeah, I wouldn't say 40. I would just be conservative at 30. But I mean, let's just say it's 375 times 0.3. It's 112 million in terms of operating cash that's going to be able to generate. So I think right now they're struggling at the $200
but that's without the overhead, right? This 120 million is without the.
Yeah, that's without overhead. But you have to think, like, they're struggling right now at 200 million or so and that's with additional capex to be able to break even, right? So even at the 200 million, they were at close to a 30%, right? Which gets them to about $60 million in cash for the year, and they're burning, I think it was like 20 to 30 million a quarter. So if that's the case, you add the 60 plus, let's just say the 120. I mean, you're at 180 million or so. So I mean, you're probably right. You probably won't break even next year. I mean, but I'm optimistic that they can.
If we go out from, let's say, the car manufacturing, I know it's not super comparable, but every time they introduce a new model, right, then they have to first invest into the machines, and then when they actually start the production, then you have to like order the materials that go into the car, and usually like at the launch, it's like super bad finances because you had to like put out so much money to get it going, right? And we don't have these details about Neutron, but if it's like, let's say that they have 3-4 customers that they sold Neutron to, then they have to order those rockets, those materials, and they have to be under production at the same time as the test is happening, and it could be very heavy on the cash. But if they manage to become cash flow positive, I will be super happy.
I mean, I think that you might not necessarily be thinking about the timing of getting all these things in order appropriately, right? I mean, you have to think you're a real estate guy. So when you're constructing a lot of these houses, the permitting, the building, and everything is most likely going to be the most expensive part. Once it's mostly built, and once you get it to like, let's just say, the terminology of as like certification of occupancy, are you spending a lot of money still at that point?
No.
So when you have all the inspectors coming to make sure, let me finish. When you have all the inspectors come in through the door to say, okay, your electricity's fine, this woodwork is fine, this paint is fine, everything is fine, the certificate of occupancy, all the money's already been spent. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so in order to get it to launch, in order to get it to sale, in order to get it to closing, which in this case will be launch, all the money's already been spent by that point. So I anticipate that we're only in a couple more quarters of any sort of serious expenses, and then it's just going through the checklist of, okay, this has been certified, this has been certified, this has been tested. So I think we're getting to the closer to the tail end than you think. I think you think that we're going to be spending an absorbed amount of money throughout the rest of 2024. And now you can rebuttal, but that's just the way I think about it.
No, the only thing that I was going to say that in my business, what's crazy is that we only get paid after the certification of occupancy and the people move in. So until then, we sign contracts and whatever deposit they pay, it's on an escrow account. So it's true that the huge money spending stopped, but we also don't have money in the bank. That's all. But it has nothing to do with Rocket Lab. It's just it's a different business. Cool. So I guess the devil is in the details of how Neutron is being developed, and hopefully we get more info on it in the next earnings call.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah,
it'll be fun.
By the way, we got a comment here. We're having a problem signing large projects at Space Systems. Not sure why. Do you feel that that's a problem, or do you feel that that is happening?
I disagree. The Globalstar deal was phenomenal and huge, and that's going to be coming out in getting a lot of sales in the first quarter of next year. And I think with that, you're going to get a lot more deals in backlog rather. But I mean, I think they've been okay at getting deals. I mean, they just put a lot of Solero contracts and SpaceX with NASA up there. I see them getting more Solero contracts. You can go on their website. They have a lot of stuff for 2024 and 2025. So I don't know if it's just because they don't see the big highlights associated with it, or I mean, it's an interesting conversation. Why they think that's the case. I see a lot of details on their Twitter coming through all the time about how they get more and more Space Systems contracts.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe this person commented about that we don't have contracts for Neutron.
Oh, yeah, maybe Neutron. Yeah, I don't know.
Because I also feel that there is, I mean, the Space Systems is doing fantastic. I mean, next quarter, it's going to be, as far as I understand, that's one of the main drivers why we're going to have the 100 million quarter in Q1. So I wouldn't say that the Space System is doing bad.
Yeah, I mean, if they could, I'd be more. If they could add more color to the question, maybe I could side with them a little bit more. But I'm not saying this person's wrong. I don't know what their perspective is, and obviously I feel that way. But from my perspective, it seems like things are going swimmingly on the Space System side, and to me, right now, it seems like there's more wins on the Space System side than there is even on the launch side with the hiatus we've had for the last few months from a launch perspective. So, I mean, Solero's up in space. They have the Psyche mission ongoing that's literally powered by Rocket Lab, and a lot of other contracts that have gone up and been successful. Black Sky, I don't see those partnerships going away, and if anything, there's still a lot of those contracts to fulfill.
Cool. All right. I think it's been a great show. I don't know, is there anything else that you want to say or add?
Nothing for me. Good chat, and appreciate you bringing some of the research forward. I'm gonna have to watch that investor relations report there with the analysts, because I didn't get a chance to watch it yet.
Yeah, no problem. Awesome. So thank you guys for watching, and we will see you next week. And yeah, peace out.
Thanks
until then.
Yep, till then. Cheers.
Ciao.